She could feel the cotton fabric tighten around her throat, but didn't want to move. She knew it would cause the shirt to tighten even more. Sometimes the monster would go too far. Hello, you are listening to In My Words. The book I am reading from is titled The Monster We Call Dad by D.A. Riles. This book is not intended for young readers. After each reading session, I will briefly give information about a chosen plant. I hope through my words you will gain insight, knowledge, and a deeper appreciation and understanding of this mysterious and intricate world. Though the road may be long and hard, compassion and beauty can be gained through the enjoyment of nature and experiencing its wondrous gifts. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate all of you who are watching my videos. If you have any questions regarding plant growing, or if you are interested in learning why I wrote the books I have, and if I am working on another book or two, please leave your comments below and I will try to get back to you in a timely manner. I am doing all the editing and producing of this content on my own. I never expected doing this at this stage of my life, but when circumstances demand, then it is important for me to create income where I can. Leaving a comment will help my videos get noticed more in the future and allow other people to view them. Also, purchasing one or both of my books will be very helpful. Thank you for your time and consideration. Chapter 27. The Punishment. Their punishment began simply. The 4 older children were put in dark closets. Sarah actually didn't mind the small confine. It felt safe to her. It was cool and calming. The musty air of the basement lingered in. She allowed herself time to relax, away from the turmoil, noise, and anger. This was almost as good as her hiding place in the bathtub, for there she knew there would be no pain, just as in this dank, dark closet. Whenever Dad would put her in the closet for punishment, she would think of ways to occupy her time. Today would be no different, except for the lack of sleep last night. So nice, she thought, nearly drifting off. Quickly, she shook herself. I can't fall asleep, she whispered aloud. If Dad comes back, I'll be in trouble. Playing games in her head helped to keep her awake during the long, dark solitude. Sometimes she would take her tiny fingers and put them together in a prayer position. Palms together, fingers straight and upright. She splayed her fingers out, her tiny hands seeming to melt together into one, moving her fingers open and closed, just like a wave moving with the tide. She didn't feel alone. It felt as if someone was there with her, guiding her little fingers to the motion. Maybe this is the way Dad feels when the monster takes over, she thought. Maybe he doesn't know it's doing it. Slowly she spread her fingers apart, feeling how far they would go. She would rather have stayed in there all day than face any other type of punishment that was to come. After 3 hours, Dad let the children out of their holding cells and continued with their punishments. He allowed the monster to be present, yet he kept it somewhat restrained. Allowing the children a bathroom break gave the monster time to plan their next punishment. It decided on standing on the stairs. Grabbing Joe by the arm, Dad dragged him onto the upstairs steps. What's that face for, boy? Dad bellowed. Are you going to cry like a little baby 'cause I hurt your puny arm? No, Joe answered simply, not caring to look at his dad, intentionally digging deeper into his son's arm as he said, What about now, you little P-U-Y? The monster snarled. No, Joe's voice was softer this time. It did hurt, but Joe knew better than to show the pain he felt, for that would cause Dad to continue on. Flinging his son's arm away from him, as if offended for lack of response, Joe nearly fell backwards. Turning his attention towards Scott, Dad said, What are you waiting for, you little faggot? Are you some type of P-U-Y like your brother? Scott quickly took his place before Dad could grab him. The monster's eyes twinkled, knowing it had all the power and not the small, helpless beings before him. Sissy ran up the stairs and stood on the 3rd highest step below Scott. The monster laughed at this display of fear. That left Sarah. She tried to duck under Dad's arm to escape retribution, but didn't succeed. Dad nabbed her by the back of the shirt and hoisted her off the ground. Since Sarah was so tiny, the monster liked to lift her off her feet using only her shirt. She could feel the cotton fabric tighten around her throat, but didn't want to move. She knew it would cause the shirt to tighten even more. Sometimes the monster would go too far, and Dad would have to pull himself back to reality. Today was one of those times. Dangling in midair, his littlest daughter stared blankly into a void of space as a veil of white passed over her eyes. Feeling a sudden heft to his small child, Dad lifted her a few inches higher to look into her eyes. They stared almost lifelessly back at him. Nearly sprinting past the 3 other children, Dad quickly went up the few steps to place Sarah on the top step. Seeing the 3 older children's confused face, he dropped the child onto the step. The sudden impact of the drop caused the young child to breathe in deeply. Seeing color fill Sarah's face, Dad stomped back down the stairs as anger for his temporary vulnerability showed through. Just as he was about to close the door, he bellowed, "If I see that you've moved from your position, your punishment will be longer. If any of you talk or sit down, your punishment will be longer. Don't piss me off any more than I already am, because then the rest of the day will be even worse for you." With that last contemptuous comment, Dad shut the door and put a table knife in it to keep it closed so the children couldn't come down. Plus, it would also be easier for him to hear if Jane removed the knife. He knew his wife could be tricky, so he made sure the little runaways had no relief from their punishments. Dad took a nap on the couch while the 4 older children stood on the stairs. There would be no way for them to move without Dad hearing them. Mom kept her distance. She didn't want to be a witness to the exploits of what her husband did, nor did she want to make things worse for the kids or herself. Many times she would take the 2 younger children and leave the house altogether to go shopping or to go to the neighbor's house. Today, Jane chose to phone the next-door neighbor and see if they would watch the 2 younger children. "Hi, Suzanne. This is Jane. Would you mind watching Johnny and Melody for a while?" "Sure, bring them over." The aspect of a hothouse, like that of a greenhouse, be such that it may receive the full effect of the sun's rays, and for this purpose it should front the south-southwest. An oblong or right-angled parallelogram is the most convenient form, both for the construction of the flues and the distribution of the plants, but they are sometimes made in a circular form for the gratification of fancy or to suit particular situations. Their height must be accommodated to the growth of the plants intended to be reared, and their dimensions to the number of plants required, keeping in view a handsome proportion to the height. The inclination which should be given to the glazed roof of a hothouse, a very considerable diversity of opinion and practice prevails. It is well known to opticians that the rays of the sun are transmitted through glass in greater abundance the more nearly they fall to the perpendicular direction upon it. If therefore the inclination of the glazed roof of a hothouse be such that the rays enter perpendicularly at the season of the year when their influence is most required, the position will be best. But one question will still remain, viz. When is the light and heat most essential? It has been contended that they are most required in spring. But if it be recollected of how much more consequence a fine autumn is than a fine spring to be to the excellence of maturity of fruits, a doubt will scarcely remain of the accuracy of T.A. Knight's opinion, that the maximum of solar heat and light is the most consequence during the period when fruit is ripening. This distinguished horticulturist, therefore, whose acute and philosophical investigations of the economy of vegetables justly entitle him to rank as one of the first authorities on this subject, recommends for a vinery that the roof should have an inclination of 34 degrees to the horizon. When this angle is adopted, the sun is vertical to its plane at the beginning of June and again early in July, and at midsummer it is only 6 degrees above the point at which it is vertical. A roof inclined in this degree admits more light than any other between the 20th of April and the 20th of August, which includes the period in which the vine blooms and ripens its fruit and forms the buds and blossoms of the succeeding season. A vinery which is constructed with a roof thus situated and which fully answered his expectations was 40 feet long and nearly 15 feet broad. The back wall of brick was about 10 feet high, and the roof extended from it to the low wall of about 2 feet in height on the opposite side. It was heated by a single fireplace. The flue went entirely around without touching the walls, and in the front a space of about 2 feet was left between the flue and the wall, in the middle of which space the vines, which were trained to the roof about 11 inches from the glass, were planted. Both the wall and the flue were placed on arches, by which means the vines were enabled to extend their roots in every direction, whilst in the spring their growth was excited by the warmth of their roots and stem received from the flue. The air was generally admitted at the ends only, where all the sashes were made to slide to afford a free passage of air through the house when necessary to prevent the grapes from becoming moldy in damp seasons. Please like, share, and subscribe. I look forward to having you join me again next time, where I will highlight another plant, and I will continue to read from the book titled The Monster We Call Dad by D.A. Riles, which you can purchase from Amazon.com. Thank you for having joined me.